In the heart of Westminster, a storm of unprecedented scale has erupted, plunging the nation into chaos. The Prime Minister, once hailed as Labour's steady hand, now stands at the epicenter of a scandal that threatens to end his leadership in a brutal collapse. The spark igniting this firestorm is a staggering figure: £22 billion, money intended for schools, hospitals, housing, and the future of ordinary families, vanished into a web of deceit. This is no ordinary political crisis, it's a betrayal that has shaken Britain to its core, fueling public outrage, fracturing party loyalty, and tarnishing the nation's global reputation. The scandal broke with a whistleblower's revelation, a voice trembling with the weight of truth, backed by leaked documents exposing a chilling reality. Billions of taxpayer pounds were siphoned through phantom companies, fraudulent contracts, and covert deals. The figure, £22 billion, stunned the nation, broadcast live to a public already battered by a cost of living crisis. Families, told repeatedly there was no money for public services, sat in disbelief, grappling with the fact that the funds were there all along, only to be stolen. The betrayal struck like a thunderbolt, transforming whispers of unease into a deafening roar for accountability. Public fury erupted instantly. Social media platforms blazed with hashtags demanding the Prime Minister's resignation, trending within minutes. Petitions for accountability surged, amassing thousands of signatures overnight. Protests spilled onto the streets, with crowds gathering outside Parliament, their chants echoing through London, Manchester, Birmingham, and beyond. Placards branded the Prime Minister a traitor, a liar, a leader who failed to protect the very people he swore to serve. For families struggling to afford food, heating, or medicine, this was no abstract scandal, it was personal, a direct assault on their sacrifices and trust. Inside Westminster, the atmosphere grew suffocating. Opposition parties seized the moment with ruthless precision. The Conservatives labelled the scandal proof of Labour's unfitness to govern, while Reform UK called it the greatest betrayal of the British people in modern history. International media amplified the crisis, splashing Britain's humiliation across front pages, portraying a nation consumed by corruption and a leader fighting for survival. The evidence was damning: contracts awarded to non-existent firms, invoices inflated to drain public funds, shell companies designed to swallow taxpayer money. Worse, documents suggested warnings were raised and ignored, implicating the leadership in a silence that felt like complicity. The most devastating blow, however, came from within Labour itself. MPs who once stood firmly behind their leader began to waver, issuing statements laced with calls for transparency and reform, code for crumbling loyalty. In the coded language of politics, these were daggers, sharp and deliberate. The Prime Minister's once unshakable support fractured, with whispers of succession plans growing louder. Names like Angela Rayner and Wes Streeting surfaced as potential replacements, signalling a party bracing for revolt. Behind closed doors, emergency meetings turned into battlegrounds, with some MPs demanding immediate resignation to salvage Labour's credibility, while others urged caution, fearing chaos. Yet the truth was undeniable: trust had shattered, and a leader without trust is a leader already fallen. The public's anger only intensified. Protests swelled, with crowds outside government buildings wielding banners demanding answers: where is the £22 billion? The betrayal cut deeper than politics, it was a wound felt in every home. Parents struggling with childcare costs, patients languishing in overcrowded hospitals, families crushed by rising bills, all now knew the money had existed, only to be stolen. The scandal transformed their struggles into a visceral sense of betrayal, fueling demands not just for resignation but for justice, prosecutions, and a reckoning for those responsible. Media coverage fanned the flames. News anchors replayed the whistleblower's testimony, their voices heavy with disbelief. Headlines screamed of betrayal, each revelation twisting the knife deeper: shell companies traced to empty offices, billions funneled into offshore accounts, contracts signed for services never delivered. The story was no longer just a scandal, it was a national emergency. Across the country, in pubs, factories, and quiet villages, the conversation was the same: how could such a vast sum vanish while public services crumbled? The outrage was raw, unfiltered, and relentless, rooted in a loss of faith in the system meant to protect the people. The Prime Minister's response did little to quell the storm. Carefully worded promises of cooperation with investigators and pledges to leave no stone unturned rang hollow against the public's fury. Every cautious phrase, every pause, every delay fed suspicions of guilt. His once disciplined image now appeared weak, evasive, a man cornered rather than in control. The British people, weary of political spin, demanded action, not words. Each hour without it drained his authority further, leaving him isolated as even his closest allies began to retreat, wary of tying their fates to a sinking leader. The opposition pressed their advantage. Conservative MPs delivered fiery speeches, branding Labour unfit to lead, while Reform UK positioned itself as the voice of honesty in a broken system. Their rhetoric resonated with an angry public, framing the Prime Minister as not just complicit but incapable of leading a scarred nation. The media amplified every blow, turning parliamentary debates into national spectacles. Internationally, the fallout was equally brutal. Headlines across Europe and America described Britain as a nation spiraling into chaos, its reputation as a pillar of democracy crumbling. Allies expressed unease, investors wavered, and the scandal became a global humiliation, transforming Britain into a cautionary tale. Inside Labour, the crisis deepened. The shadow cabinet split, with some urging unity to avoid civil war, while others insisted survival depended on the Prime Minister's removal. Names of potential successors circulated openly, a sign of open rebellion. The very act of discussing replacements was a betrayal, but one born of desperation. Labour's survival now hinged not on its leader's resilience but on his exit. The media, sensing blood, shifted from questioning if he would resign to when. Every broadcast, every headline, every leaked document pointed to failures under his watch, eroding what remained of his credibility. The demand for a public inquiry grew louder. Opposition leaders, watchdog groups, and the public called for a full investigation into how £22 billion vanished, who profited, and who ignored the warnings. For the Prime Minister, this was a trap. Resisting it implied guilt, while agreeing risked exposing deeper failures, perhaps even complicity. Legal experts spoke of criminal negligence, of corruption on a scale that could scar Britain for decades. The international community watched closely, with allies questioning Britain's stability and foreign media describing the scandal as a stain on its legacy. In Westminster, panic spread. Advisers debated strategy, some urging the Prime Minister to fight on, others warning that clinging to power would destroy the party. Once loyal allies grew silent, their absence a louder condemnation than any speech. The chants outside Parliament, resign now, became the soundtrack of his downfall. The air was thick with betrayal, distrust, and fear. The question was no longer if he could repair the damage, but how long he could survive. With every headline, every protest, every whisper of revolt, the answer grew clearer: the fall was not a possibility, but a countdown. The storm has breached Parliament's walls, spreading through Labour's ranks like wildfire. MPs who once defended their leader now demand answers that never come. Discipline, once his strength, has collapsed, replaced by open defiance. Emergency meetings are battlegrounds, with calls for resignation growing louder. The Prime Minister stands alone, his authority drained, his allies retreating, his nation turning against him. The £22 billion betrayal has stripped him bare, exposing not just financial corruption but a moral failure that has shattered trust. The clock is ticking, and the end is near.